Today I'm going to be discussing my 2026 knitting goals and inspiration for the new year. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Hella Knits. My name is Julia. Today I'm going to be discussing my 2026 knitting plans, goals, and inspiration for the new year. This is definitely going to be more of a chatty rambles video, so if you're into that, then keep on watching. Reflecting on all the things that I made in 2025 really helped me to understand the kinds of things that I enjoy knitting and I actually like to wear. Really what I'm hoping for 2026 is for my knitting to be sort of intentional and practical for my wardrobe and my day-to-day life. And I also want to focus on trying new things and learning new knitting techniques because ultimately that's really why I started knitting in the first place. Is I love learning and I love trying new things, sort of experimenting and building my skill set. So that's kind of a broad theme for this video and for my knitting plans and hopes for 2026. Before we get into the knitting, I want to address the elephant in the room, which is the obvious new location that I'm in. For those of you who don't know, I'm currently in medical school. During the last 2 years of school, at least in Canada, they send you on your clinical placements. So you basically have to go through all the different medical departments, work with different doctors, and learn on the job. These rotations and placements are not actually always at your home institution though. Sometimes they'll send you away to other locations, and that is what is happening right now. Luckily, I'm not having to stay at a student accommodation though. The place that I'm at is close enough where I can actually stay with my family. So that is where I am right now. This is going to be the background, I think, for the next couple months of videos because this is what I'm working with. I've done the best that I can do. Hopefully you enjoy my little sign up here, Hella Knits. All that is to say, I apologize if the lighting is a little bit off. I know this room is a little echoier than usual, so please bear with me as I'm figuring things out in my new location. Also, apologies if you can hear our neighbors shoveling outside. There was another snowstorm this morning, so please bear with me in terms of the outside sounds. We're just working with what we can today. Normally in the new year with knitting, I have so much inspiration and I'm super excited to cast on everything and I just have crazy cast on energy, but I feel like it took me a while to actually get settled and I'm feeling a little bit displaced being in a new environment. I definitely am a creature of habit and I love my routine and my cozy space. That's when I can really allow my knitting creativity to thrive. So it has been a little chaotic in the new year, getting settled in here. Now that it's been a couple weeks, I'm feeling a little more calm. Something else I want to mention in the new year is the seasons are kind of changing and we recently had a bunch of snowstorms in Ontario, which is nice for knitting, but it also can be hard, making it feel like the winter is just going to drag on and on. All that's to say, I've really noticed that the energy and the change in environment and all the new things happening in this new year 2026 have really affected my kind of knitting mojo, the things that I'm kind of leaning towards and drawn towards knitting on. Things are just changing, and I did finish my most recent kind of large whip, the Ivy blouse, on the very last day of 2025. So instead of having super exciting cast on energy, I'm feeling just a little bit more paralyzed. But yes, I have recently started finding a little more excitement in knitting things and casting on new things, trying new things, and I feel like now that I'm settled, I'm getting into my knitting mojo again, which is feeling really, really good. That's why I want to frame this video as more of an inspiration video and overarching goals for the year for me to look back on as I go through my knitting in 2026, as opposed to like a rigid make 9 list of things that I definitely have to do this year. This whole transitionary period between moving where I'm living, transitioning between semesters has really shown me that, your knitting mojo can come and go, and the things that you're excited on knitting one day can change when your environment changes. You just want something that's a little more comforting sometimes, or at other times when you're feeling settled in your life, then maybe you're ready to try something new and challenge yourself. Things change and it's okay to be excited about different things in knitting. That's why I love knitting, because it is a choose your own adventure. You can choose to have something a little more comforting and mindless, use it as just a way to relax and take care of yourself after a hard day. And on other days where I have a more chill day or I'm feeling really recharged, then I could see myself reaching for something a little more complicated and technical. So that was a huge introduction to this video. I hope you're catching my drift. I am super excited to talk about all of these things. I have a few goals for the year. I have a few actual plans that I have the yarn for. I may or may not have casted on already or am planning on casting on in the coming weeks. So I'm okay talking about that because obviously I have the yarn and the pattern and the plans for like the immediate new year cast-ons. And then I also have just some general inspiration and things that have been floating around in my knitting mind that I want to talk to you about in terms of ideas for future cast-ons later in the year. Let's talk about knitting. Okay, what I'm wearing is the Super Selene sweater from Ventzel. I talked about this in previous podcast videos. I finished this last year in 2025 in the summertime. This is a top-down colorwork yoke sweater with this geometric pattern. It's very oversized. I made the smallest size in the cropped version, and I brought this on my trip to Iceland, and it's perfect for layering. The black color is Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino, held with the Sandnes Garn Tynn Silk Mohair in the black color, and the white color is Cascade 220, also held with Sandnes Garn Tynn Silk Mohair in the white color. All the details of this sweater are found in my Ravelry and will be listed in the description below, along with a link to my Ravelry page. Anything else I discuss throughout this video will be linked down below as well. Why don't we just get into it, and I will talk about my 2026 knitting goals. First knitting goal that I have for 2026 is to make more wearable everyday knits. I think I did a pretty good job of this in 2025, honestly, when I was reflecting on everything that I made in the past year, which you can check out that video after this one. It'll be linked down below. But yes, I definitely found that the things that I made in 2025 were a lot more wearable. What do I mean by wearable? This is something that I actually have had to think about. What is it about a garment or a piece of knitwear that actually makes it wearable and practical for me? I definitely am a garment knitter. I love knitting a good sweater or cardigan. It is by far my favorite thing to knit, and I've knit a ton of sweaters for myself over the years. I've noticed though that there are certain qualities about a sweater that actually make it wearable for my day-to-day life. By that I mean something that's cropped but not too cropped. I definitely have a short torso. Like for my height, my torso takes up much less of my height than my legs do, so I tend to have to crop sweaters a lot. But I don't like things that are super cropped where my belly sticks out, because it makes it impractical for work. Like I don't want that showing while I'm at work, and also it just makes it impractical for the weather conditions. Like I don't want a draft coming up my sweater because it's too short. So usually hip length is what I prefer, and that's the length that I go for a sweater, just an easy throw on sweater, because it's the most comfortable and I feel like it's the most flattering for me. Something else that I find makes sweaters a lot more practical is having sleeves that are not super huge and billowy. I say this as I'm wearing this sweater with massive sleeves, but this is something that I would not wear to work, for example, because this sleeve is going to be getting caught on everything. It's gonna get dirty. It's gonna dip in food if I'm eating it. Like that is not the vibe. This is kind of a sweater that I'll wear out. I can definitely fold up the sleeves and make it work, but it's not something that I would say is practical on like a day-to-day work basis. So something with sleeves that are not super long or super big also is a quality that I find more practical for my knitwear in terms of the things that I can wear to work and if I'm actually doing things. You know what I mean? At the same time though, I've been having a lot of fun with color and texture over the last year, and I think that something with a more reserved fit but a fun color or texture makes an everyday practical sweater more interesting and still exciting to put on. Kind of keeps it from being too boring, you know what I mean? This sweater, for example, although it doesn't fit the sleeve definition of practical, it does fit in the other categories because of the perfectly cropped length. It's not too thick either, so I can layer it really easily. It's been really good for like hiking, going out on a weekend, or just throwing it on at home, honestly, if I'm chilly. And because of the color work, it makes it a little more interesting than just a plain black sweater. And of course, different sweaters are going to be practical on different occasions. Like if I'm mostly inside on a given day, or if I'm mostly outside on a given day, I'll choose accordingly. But yeah, generally that's kind of how I see knitwear as being more practical for me, is like not super oversized, not huge long billowy sleeves, something that's a little more fitted and not too long either, so it can be more versatile like at work versus at home. So in 2026, I want to consider the actual fit and wearability of things before I make them, to make things that are a lot more practical, or I guess continue to make things that are practical for my wardrobe as the year goes on, so I'm actually wearing and using the things that I'm knitting. My second goal for 2026 is to continue learning and challenging myself. Last year I experimented with a lot of different fibers and yarns that I'd never used before, and I really really enjoyed the experience of knitting with new yarns. When I first started knitting, I definitely used a lot of mostly drops yarns, honestly, because I wanted to knit with natural fibers, but I didn't want to spend the money on expensive fibers, and knitting is expensive. I knit every day, but I really only have so much time in the day sometimes to knit. I want to make that time count by using fibers that are really nice and beautiful on my hands and I enjoy working with. So that is not to say that drops is bad. That is just to say that I'm so glad that I kind of got out of my bubble and have been experimenting with new fibers and yarns. I think part of that has to do with understanding gauge too. When I first started knitting, I really didn't understand gauge, so I just would knit the yarns that were recommended in the pattern or kind of standard gauge yarns that I could find from commercial brands. But this past year, I've been experimenting more with combining different fibers, combining different strands of yarn, and figuring out the fabric that I like based on my gauge and kind of working backwards from the yarn to the garment instead of the other way around. But yes, I did experiment a lot with fibers and yarn. I definitely want to continue doing that in 2026 because it's brought me a lot of joy, not only having the experience of trying new yarns, experimenting with a lot of Canadian owned brands of yarn, which I hadn't done prior to 2025 all that much, and having a larger variety of like knitwear textures and feel. But in terms of this goal of learning and challenging myself, I want to try more complicated techniques. That is part of the reason why I started knitting in the first place, is because I love learning new things and developing new skills and kind of getting better at things as I go. I love teaching myself new skills and learning things along the way. So I really want to focus on that this year. I think by doing this, it'll keep my knitting more interesting. There's definitely still a place in my knitting for a basic stockinette drop shoulder sweater. It's just a classic mindless knit. Sometimes you need something that's mindless and comfortable to just turn your brain off and relax in your knitting after the end of a hard day or when you just need to shut down and unwind. But also, I want to have more challenging pieces on my needles because I feel like I didn't do that a whole lot in 2025. I did have a couple sweaters that were really textured and had some zipper installation this past year, which was nice, but in terms of the actual construction of the garment, I want to get a better understanding of how things are steeked, for example, or doing bottom up, which I will get to in my actual New Year's cast on plans. I want to get comfortable this year trying new techniques and challenging myself and failing a couple times too, because I have to accept that I'm not going to be perfect on the first time I try a new technique or skill, and that's okay. That's like part of the joy of knitting too, is troubleshooting and failing so that you can do better next time. My third and final goal for 2026 is related to my sock machine. A big goal for 2026 for me is going to be learning how to use all of the attachments on my sock machine, including my ribber attachment and how to do a heel turn on my machine. I have the parts printed, but I have been kind of putting it off, if I'm honest, because I've been trying to perfect the tube making process, which is the most basic form of knitting that you could do on the sock machine, I guess you could say. I do have a video tutorial out of how to use the sock machine and how to make a basic tube, but honestly I find that the other attachments have just been a bit overwhelming for me lately, and I'm not sure exactly why. So I'm not aiming to rush or force myself to learn how to use this machine all at once. I want to take things step by step, and I think what's been stopping me is I haven't perfected making a simple stockinette tube on my machine. But I have to just remind myself that I don't have to be an expert at doing the sock tube before I can learn how to use my ribber properly. I think something else that's been hindering me is I haven't had a whole lot of balance between my hand knitting and my machine knitting this year in terms of like my knitting creativity and my output. I don't want to set like a hard goal for number of socks for me to knit this year on my machine, but I do just want to be more mindful of mixing my hand knitting in with my machine knitting. I think I have a bit of a fear of like wasting yarn or breaking my machine by using it too much or making tubes that don't turn out well. I think I just have to get over that and realize that I can frog a sock and re-knit it on my machine no problem. And once I do that, I'll have a lot more freedom in my mind, at least, to knit whatever I want on my machine intermittently throughout the year, maybe at a little higher frequency than I did in 2025. So goal number 3 is to incorporate my sock machine more into my knitting and my creative knitting thought process in 2026. That is all the goals that I had for this year. The next thing I want to discuss is the projects that I'm actively excited about / may or may not have already cast on in 2026 that I think I've kind of brought back my knitting mojo and knitting inspiration, so let's get into it. The first thing I want to discuss is the Blossom sweater from the Happy Nordic Knits book. I have it here. This is a book that I got from my boyfriend for Christmas. It's by Une Cecilie Oxvold, who's a Norwegian knitwear designer. This book has so many beautiful color work, sweater patterns, as well as accessories for the wintertime that are good for hiking, and they're all inspired by traditional Norwegian knitwear design. The Blossom sweater is one that I'm flipping through these pages not realizing you can probably hear the flipping on my mic, so I'll just get to the page and show you. This is the Blossom sweater, an all over colorwork sweater that is knit from the bottom up, and it's actually steeked. The second that I saw this pattern in this book, I knew that I had to knit it because there's something about these colors that are really just calling to me, honestly. I don't know what it is. Maybe I can put a picture on the screen of the sweater so you can see it a little better instead of getting the glare from this book, but I don't know what it is. I've never knit anything in this mint green color. I think it helps that the model has blonde hair also and kind of looks like me, so I could see myself wearing that sweater. Something about the colors on that sweater are truly just happy, which makes sense because it's the name of the book. It's the vibe of the book. Another reason why I'm excited to make this sweater is because of the yarn. It's using Hillesvåg Luna base yarn, and I want to show it to you because I have it next to me and it is incredible. This is a little sneak peek for my next podcast video, but look at this yarn, you guys. This is, oh my god, can you see it? Oh, it's so much yarn. This is Hillesvåg Luna yarn, which is a 100% Norwegian wool, Norwegian lamb's wool, and it is a 2-ply woolen spun yarn, so it's 100 grams equals 200 meters. Here it is. This is the main color, which is mint green, color number 56444. So it's this really beautiful mint green kind of, yeah. It's kind of like a blue-green. It's more blue than green, if I'm honest. And then, so this is going to be the main color of the sweater. I shouldn't go into too much detail about this because I am going to talk about it in my next podcast video, but I just want to show you the yarn because it's so beautiful. These are the contrast colors as well. They're also in the Luna base. So I have this pink, purple, orange, and green. These are actually the exact yarns that are called for in the pattern. I tried so many different color combinations when I was planning on getting the yarn for this sweater, and I just couldn't see myself knitting anything else aside from the version that's in the pattern because the colors are just so perfect in my opinion. I actually did order this yarn directly from Hillesvåg to Canada, and I'll get into it more in my podcast video, but that is super exciting, and I think that it's really cool that I was able to get the yarn directly from the mill. Another reason why I'm super excited about this sweater in particular is because of the construction, and it's sort of aligns with my goals for the 2026 year that I just discussed. So this sweater is actually knit from the bottom up. It's all over colorwork and the armholes are steeked. So those are 3 things that I've never done before. Bottom up sweaters have definitely intimidated me in the past because I feel like I didn't have an understanding of what length I wanted my sweaters to be or what length I preferred my sweaters to be. And because it's a bottom up construction, you're not actually able to try it on as you go as well as you would a top down construction. So that's why I've been hesitant to do one up until now. But as I mentioned earlier in the video, I feel like I do have a really good understanding now of what length I actually want my sweaters to be. I usually like 30 centimeters from the underarm. That's like my perfect cropped length. I could go like 25 to 35. That's kind of my buffer. Knowing that, I think I'll be able to make this sweater with a lot more confidence, and I feel like I'll probably have to crop it based on what it looks like in the book, but that's fine. Bottom up construction, that's one new thing. Another thing is all over colorwork. So obviously I'm wearing a colorwork sweater. I have one other colorwork sweater that I had made for myself. I think it was 2 years ago now. I think it was in 2020. It was the Celeste sweater from Petite Knit, and I had a ton of issues with gauge on that sweater. It was a nightmare. If you want to learn more, you can go to my Everything I Knit in 2024 video. This was a little bit more redemption of colorwork for me, but my gauge, as you can see, is still a little bit off. Like the yoke is a little bit tighter than the sleeve in the body because I'm still kind of perfecting my colorwork tension. I have done a colorwork hat since this sweater, which turned out a lot better in terms of my tension. So I can see myself improving. I think the more I practice, the more I'll improve, obviously. So I'm excited to try an all over color work because it'll really allow me to practice literally the entire sweater, my color work tension. And finally, the third new thing that I'm going to be learning on this sweater is steeking. Steeking has always scared me, you guys. Something about cutting my knitting makes me so nervous. The first time I ever cut knitting was when I was grafting a men's sweater to make it shorter. I feel like I've done enough exposure therapy grafting things now that it's not so bad. So the natural next step is steeking. This one is good because it's only the armholes that are steeked, so I feel like it's less scary because it's a shorter length as opposed to steeking an entire button band. So I'm thinking that this will be my first steeking experiment and we'll see how it goes. I think that there are instructions in the pattern on how to do that, so fingers crossed I can figure it out. I am a pretty experienced sewist as well, so I think that I can use my machine on my knitting just fine. It's just the cutting that makes me a little bit nervous, but we will get through it together. I also am excited about this pattern, not only because it's got such happy colors, it's going to be challenging technically, but it also has really positive associations. As I said, my partner gave me this book for Christmas. It was a complete surprise, and I was honestly pleasantly surprised by how good his taste in knitting books was. This knitting book has so many patterns in it that I'm super excited to make, even more so than the knitting books that I've purchased for myself in the recent past. So it truly is a happy knitting pattern and a happy knitting project to move into the new year with. The second project that I'm super excited about in terms of my new year knits is the Punktar Cardigan from Istex. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'll put a photo of it on the screen. This project I actually recently cast on using some yarn that I got from Iceland. I can show it to you. I did show this in a previous podcast episode after I came back from my trip. These are the 3 colors that I'm using. This is Istex Let Lopi in the, I think they have actual names, but the numbers are 1702, which is the main color. It's this blue multi-colored yarn. 1412, which is one of the contrast colors in this pink kind of speckly color. And then the white is 0051. So these are the colors I'm using. It's Istex Let Lopi, which is 50 grams per 100 meters in 100% Icelandic sheep's wool. As I said, I got these on our trip to Iceland last summer. The reason I'm excited about this is because it is more of a traditional Icelandic style, and I thought it would be perfect to cast on with this yarn that I got from Iceland that's made of Icelandic sheep's wool. How could it get more perfect than that? But also it is steeked as well. This one is not steeked in the armholes, but it's steeked up the button band because it is a cardigan. Again, this pattern is made from the bottom up. It has a round yoke construction with the color work, so obviously I'll be doing decreases, and then at the very end you pick up for the sleeves and then you steek the button band and you attach buttons to it. This is an exciting cast on because it's made from souvenir yarn that I got while on vacation, but I feel like it's a natural next step in my steeking journey. Once I steek the sleeves on my blossom sweater, I can do a little bit of a larger steek on the button band of this one. And it's also going to give me an opportunity to practice my color work, especially in small circumference as you get to the upper part of the yoke. I also was reading ahead on this pattern, and the construction is definitely interesting considering you have to steek the button band, but you start by knitting the bottom hem of the sweater and then you start the steek. As with all the projects I'll talk about, I'm going to get into it more in my next podcast episode, so make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the details of these projects. This construction is something that I've never done before, so I'm excited to learn how the sleeves kind of come together and how to do the steek based on the pattern. As with the blossom sweater, this is going to be a really good opportunity for me to practice my color work and improve my tension, because that's something that I really want to get better at throughout the year of 2026. The next project that I'm excited about is something I recently cast on as well, and it is the all too popular sailor slippers from Annie Sews. I'm using Sandnes Garn Fritids Garn, I think that's how you say it, in these 2 colors, this pink and this purple color. I think they are just so fun and vibrant. I've already cast these on, as I said, and I'll discuss it at length in my next podcast. I feel like everyone and their mother has knit a pair of sailor slippers in the last couple months, but I am here, I am doing it. I feel like I'm the last one on the trend. These basically are these massive slippers that you knit in a bulky weight woolly wool, and then you put them in the wash and felt them so they shrink down into a dense kind of slipper sock for the house. So that is what I'm planning on doing. This is my very first time felting anything on purpose, so I'm a little bit nervous, but I have faith in the process that it's going to work out. I feel like non-garment projects have been feeling a little more refreshing for me lately in this kind of transitionary period in my life. Up until now, I hadn't really found a non-garment project that I actually enjoyed making. I've made a lot of hats and small scarves, but as you know, if you've been watching my previous videos, I actually hate hand knitting socks. I'm not the biggest fan of colorwork mittens either. Finding something like this that I've actually been excited about knitting on and enjoyed casting on has been rare, especially because it's not a sweater. The idea of them is really practical in terms of having a cute slipper that you can wear around the house. It doesn't seem to me like it's going to take that long to make, so I feel like the time spent to use ratio of this pattern is pretty good. I feel like these slippers are also a little bit more technique based than just a plain hat, sock, or mitten where it's just in the round forever and ever. That aspect of it makes it a lot more engaging for me as well and makes the process a little bit more enjoyable than just a plain sock. They have a lot more finishing than I kind of expected too, because actually the top of the mitten and the sole of the mitten are seamed together by hand. I feel like I might actually enjoy the process of seaming and finishing it all because it'll go by a little bit quicker, and I haven't done seaming in probably 5 years of my knitting, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that is the sailor slippers. I am very excited to be working on these, and that is the last of my 2026 New Year's cast-ons. Next thing I want to talk about is not exactly a goal and it's not exactly a project, but it's more of a concept. It's making sure that I'm conscious about repairing and modifying my knits so they actually get worn. For example, I made a melange sweater man for Devin in 2024. I was getting impatient with the body. I cast it off. I blocked it twice because it was a little bit too short the first time. The second time was better and he did wear it a couple times, but it still was too short. And I feel like that sweater hasn't gotten as much wear simply because it's like an inch or two too short in the back. That pattern does have short rows to shape the back, but I feel like he just has a long back and needs a little bit extra attention back there. So the yarn I use for that one is Knitting for Olive Merino in 2 different colors. I think it's slate gray and granite gray, or maybe it's slate gray and thundercloud. I'll put it on the screen, but I'm holding that double using a 3.75mm needle to get gauge, and the pattern's by Petite Knit, obviously. Yeah, one of my plans for 2026 is actually already in the works. I ordered the yarn because I didn't quite have enough left over of both colors to knit the sweater longer, so I ordered a ball of each of those yarns, and I'm going to graft and extend the sweater, and I might even add a couple short rows in the back just to give him like a couple extra inches of length to make it a lot more wearable. When I took the sweater back to reknit it, I realized that the fabric is so nice. Like, the Knitting for Olive Merino is insanely soft and beautiful when it's all knit up, and especially after he had worn it a couple times, I was shocked. That fabric is so nice, and honestly, the Knitting for Olive Merino, when you're knitting with it, is not anything to sneeze at, if I'm being frank. Like, it's not too exciting. It's a light fingering weight yarn. It feels a little bit thin when you're knitting with it, but something about blocking it, it plumps up and then you wear it a couple times, and that fabric is beautiful. So I've really enjoyed feeling the fabric, and so has he. We pulled that sweater out for me to lengthen it. As soon as he felt it, he was like, oh my god, I can't wait for this to be a little bit longer so I can wear it, because I'm going to wear it all the time, which is nice to hear. I feel a little bit guilty because I should have made it longer in the first place, but such is life. We are here now, and as I said, I've grafted a few sweaters in my time, so I think it's going to be okay. I will update you on my next podcast as to how that went, but that's one of the things that got me thinking of repairing and fixing existing knits to make them more wearable. Something else I thought about changing was my sweater 14 v-neck. I wore it in my last video. The fabric is beautiful. It's made with Noro Silk Garden Sock Solo Merino in the blue color, I don't know what the name of it is, and a strand of Mohair, but I didn't quite get enough of that Noro yarn when I first made this sweater, and so I had to crop it quite a bit. I think that results in me not wearing it as much as I would want to because it's so beautiful, and the color I feel like is really good on my complexion. I can put a picture here of the sweater. All of the pictures I have are of like the armpit up of the sweater because it is too short, honestly, like to be practical on a day-to-day. So something I was thinking, I haven't actually gotten yarn for this or made concrete plans, but this kind of got me thinking that it would be nice to maybe lengthen that sweater in 2026 so I wear it a little bit more. Something else I thought about was my Elizabeth blouse. I made that in Cardiff Cashmere Classic. It is so beautiful, but I don't wear it because, again, it's too cropped. Because guess what? I didn't buy enough yarn to make it the length that I wanted. I just wanted the finished object and I wasn't really thinking about the practicality of it being so cropped. All of that to say, I feel like my standards for a finished knitted garment have definitely changed. Years ago, I would just race to finish a project without really thinking about how practical it would be or the fit and the details and the finishing of the sweater because I was so excited about having the finished garment and being able to wear it. I feel like I've accumulated so many hand knit sweaters over the years that now I'm thinking more reflectively, considering things that I might change or modify about the sweaters that I have to make them get more use in my everyday life. I want to talk about like emotional attachment versus practicality when you're thinking about frogging or modifying projects that you've already made. I definitely feel like I fall into that trap sometimes of getting emotionally attached to my knitwear because I only have so much time in the day. I'm busy, I'm in school, you know, I have all of these things going on, and sometimes I feel like if I frog a sweater or I go back and I change it once it's already done, I'm like undoing or somehow wasting the time that I spent on making it. In the new year, and as I've been reflecting over the things that I made in years prior to 2025 and compared it to the more recent things I've made that are more practical, I think I'm learning to appreciate that all of this frogging and fixing and modifying and the finishing details that you put on a sweater, it's all part of the process of knitting. Learning to really appreciate finishing and making things actually practical, kind of putting in the time to make things perfect or as close to perfect as I can get so that they actually get more wear. And honestly, doing that makes me feel so much more proud and satisfied with the things that I'm making. I guess you could say I want to think a little bit more critically about the knits that I have, be a little creative in terms of things I could change or modify or even frog and repurpose the yarn for something that actually will get worn in 2026. All right, you guys, we are very quickly losing daylight, so let's get this show on the road. The final kind of broad topic I wanted to talk about was general ideas and inspiration for later in the year cast-ons in 2026. It's nothing that I have direct plans or yarn for, but these are things that have been kind of milling about in my brain. I wanted to get them out there into the universe, see what you guys think, give you an idea of the things that I've been excited about and interested in, kind of casting on later in the year, things I might keep in mind when I'm yarn shopping, etc. throughout the year. So let's get into it. Looking back on all of my knits in 2025, I definitely made a lot of pinks, reds, and neutrals. That was kind of the theme in terms of the colors of all of the things that I knit in the last year. I really loved it. Honestly, I've been a lot more comfortable wearing like loud and vibrant colors in my everyday life. Years ago, I would only ever wear blacks and neutrals and dark colors because I was honestly self-conscious about standing out on the day-to-day. But when I first started knitting years ago, it was actually an opportunity for me to experiment with color and try new things because I could pick the yarn, I could pick the pattern, and I felt like I had a more autonomy and choice over what it is that I was making and eventually wearing. In terms of my color choice throughout the year and just in general, I don't feel like I necessarily follow the trends or even have seasonal changes in my color choice because obviously throughout 2025 I was making a lot of similar color choices, but I've just shifted towards being more comfortable wearing bright and bold colors, especially my favorite color, pink. As you know, I started med school rotations in the fall, which involves me wearing a variety of things, including scrubs, of course, but also in outpatient clinics, I'm able to wear business casual attire. That's kind of been an opportunity for me to wear my knits to work in more of a professional setting. I was initially worried when I started rotations that I wouldn't be able to wear my knits as much as I wanted to, especially the brightly colored ones or the pink ones in particular. popular because I'd be seen as unprofessional somehow or not taken seriously, and that is such a falsehood that I feel like a lot of people in my position fall into. It's honestly sad that women in medicine or in other professional settings are considered unprofessional simply for the things that they wear or the way that they look. For example, I have blonde hair and my favorite color is pink. I've been actually warned several times by peers that if I am to wear pink in the workplace, that there's a chance I won't be taken seriously because of people's kind of preconceived ideas of how competent I am just based on how I look. But I've learned over the past few months that expressing myself in the workplace, of course in an appropriate way, is actually a strength. And I can easily demonstrate my competence and professionalism through the way I behave with my coworkers and my patients, and none of that is based on what I wear. Does that make sense? All that is to say, I will continue to knit in bright colors because that's what brings me joy, and I am no longer afraid to wear bright, bold, or vibrant colors at work or in any setting for that matter, because it's how I feel most confident and it makes life fun. On that note, I wanted to give you an overview of some new colors that I've been eyeing and thinking about knitting on in 2026. Green tones is the first color that really came to mind when I was brainstorming what I might be excited on knitting in 2026. As I said, I don't have yarn for this right now, but I've really been excited about the idea of having something like a Kelly or a leaf green. I'll put some examples on the screen of color swatches that I think would be really good with my complexion, and it's something that's kind of missing in my knit wardrobe that I think I would get a lot of wear out of, honestly. I generally have an aversion to earth tones like certain browns. I'm okay with like a rich, cool toned chocolate brown, but I feel like tans and creams that lean more warm really wash me out. So I haven't knit with a whole lot of browns and greens in general for that reason. But Eweknit recently had a sale and I nearly bought a sweater quantity of yarn. I had to restrain myself. I was really eyeing the Knitting for Olive Clover Green colorway. It's like this really vibrant leaf / Kelly green. It leans a little more cool neutral, and I feel like that or something like that would be really complimentary on my skin tone and something that I would get a lot of wear out of. Second color that I'm excited / inspired by in 2026 is like a bright fuchsia, not like a light pink fuchsia, but a deep, rich, cool toned fuchsia. Think like Barbie logo pink. As you know, I've knit a lot of reds and pinks. I feel like a deep fuchsia is a little more of a sophisticated version of that I also am missing in my knit wardrobe, and I feel like, again, would look really complimentary on my complexion, kind of a cool, rich fuchsia. Finally, purples. I think I mentioned this before, but I have very little purple in my knit wardrobe. It kind of feels like the missing link between the pinks and reds that I made in 2025 and the more blue tones that I was knitting a lot on in 2024. Again, I generally prefer more of like a cool purple on my skin tone instead of a warm purple. Just because of my undertones, I feel like I lean a lot more cool. Recently, I did actually pick up a whip that has been in hibernation for a little too long, and it's the Brady Loop sweater from Other Loops. Let me show it to you. This is it. It is knit with this, obviously, and it's a purple yarn. I won't get into it in detail because I'll talk about this more in my next podcast video. This is the sweater that I'm using to kind of dip my toes into purple. I've had this yarn for a long time. I'm knitting it with the Garn Kid Seta, which is a 40% silk, 60% merino in the color 612. This is a light fingering weight yarn, and I'm holding it with the Issayer Silk Mohair in the color 12. So these are essentially a perfect match for one another, and they complement each other so nicely. So this is the purple. It's definitely a lighter purple, but it is cool toned, and I feel like it'll go well with my complexion. It's a little lighter and more pastel than I'm used to, but I am excited to be working on this again and kind of expanding my horizons in terms of color. The last kind of point of inspiration that I wanted to touch on for this video is to make one sweater that's just a plain everyday staple sweater. Now, I know I talked about wanting to expand my horizons and challenge myself, which I definitely still do, but one thing that I don't have in my knitting wardrobe is just a plain old sweater. Something that is not too oversized, not too cropped, not too heavy, something that I can just throw on for work and is just a little bit less of a statement in terms of the fit and texture, even if it's a bright color. I feel like something that's like a DK or sport weight gauge that's just all over stockinette. Maybe a raglan or a contiguous shoulder shaping would be really nice. Not too oversized in the body and sleeves, and something that I can like roll up or scrunch up on my arm. That's like the size of sleeve that I want so that it doesn't get dirty. Realistically, I don't need a ton of sweaters like this, but I would love just one to make this year that I could throw into my wardrobe that's just like a basic in terms of the size and fit. Think like petite knit Monday sweater. Like that is the vibe that I'm kind of aiming for with this kind of point of inspiration for the year. Something else I wanted to throw in here as well was my thoughts on vests. The only vest that I've ever knit is the My Favorite Things Knitwear vest number. I don't know which number it was, but it was one of them. This is a top-down v-neck vest. Oh, and it has buttons down the front. As you can see, I made this in one strand of Drops alpaca and one strand of Barocco Ariel silk mohair. The alpaca was in like a gray mix, and then the Ariel was in black. So it's this really dark charcoal color with some nice like alpaca hairs sticking out. This vest doesn't get a ton of wear because I feel like I'm just limited in the outfits that I can wear with it. I usually will wear this with a black turtleneck underneath or a black t-shirt and then gray or black trousers, and that's it. Like I feel like sometimes I don't know how to wear a vest, and I don't know if it's because it's a vest or if it's because it's this vest and it has buttons down the front and it's like a v-neck, so I definitely need something underneath. I like the idea of a vest. I like the weight of this vest. I like the fit of this vest, but I'm wondering if a crew neck vest would be better suited for me. Something that I could throw on. I don't need anything crazy underneath. Like I could just wear a t-shirt underneath, or I could wear it on its own. Nothing too heavy. I feel like a DK weight or a sport weight gauge would be good. Kind of similar to this fabric, maybe with like an alpaca or a mohair for a nice drape. Like not too stiff, not too chunky. I feel like something like that would not only be satisfying to knit because you don't have to make sleeves, but also I feel like it might be a little more versatile than this one, which is more open. Does that make sense? Am I the only one who feels that way? Let me know if you guys are vest people, because I feel like I want to be converted. I want to be a vest person, and I'm just not there yet, but I want to be. That is something I'm kind of toying with for 2026. Obviously, my plans for the year are going to change. They're going to evolve, and that's okay, and that's part of the joy of knitting. Knitting now in this new year, especially in a new environment, is just about finding joy and being intentional with the things that I'm making in 2026. That's what knitting has always been about, is having fun. So that's what it will continue to be about. If certain things become less fun or more fun throughout the year, then that's great. I'm just gonna go with it and follow my heart with my knitting. Knitting has always been a really awesome creative outlet that I have to express myself, and I feel like over the years I've gotten so much more creative with the things that I'm making and more comfortable wearing the things that I'm making because they're more practical, and I've just become a little bit more bold and crazy, you know, in the last couple years, wearing things that I might not have worn, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, and I think that that's awesome. I'm also super excited to learn new skills and challenge myself this year. As I said, that is part of the reason why I started knitting in the first place. I truly love learning new things, trying new things, experimenting, and always challenging myself. I feel like that's part of the joy of knitting for me, is failing a couple times and troubleshooting and figuring things out on the fly. So that is something that's really exciting me right now. The projects that I have and I'm working on are all new, different, and a little challenging in different ways. I want to invite you guys into the conversation. Let me know what you think down below. What is it that you have on your knitting goals, knitting intentions for 2026? And what are you planning on casting on in the new year? I would love to know. If you guys have any questions, you can check the description down below. I have details of everything that I've talked about. If you want details about yarn used, gauge, modifications, anything like that, of my current knitting projects or anything I've done in the past, you can check out my Ravelry, which is at Hella Knitting. I also have an Instagram page where I post updates in between videos, little photos. I've been dabbling in some reels here and there. It's at hella.knits on Instagram. You can follow me there to be updated in between videos. I also made a TikTok. I know. Am I too old for a TikTok? Don't answer that. I made a TikTok. It is at Hella Knits on TikTok. I essentially am just putting my Instagram reels there. I'm not going to be a TikTok pro or anything, but it might be a good way to kind of spread my audience and share some fun little videos here and there. So yes, feel free to follow me on there as well. That is it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you all in my next video. Bye!